If y'all have Bibles, go ahead and open up to Luke 15, and we're going to start kind of midway through the story of where we were reading last night with the parable of the lost son. I'll start in verse 17. When he came to his senses, everybody say, when he came to his senses. He said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I'm going to set out. I'm going to go back to my father, and I'm going to say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." And then the next verse is where we're just going to spend all of this morning, or not even the whole next verse, just the next few words. So he got up and he went to his father. So he got up and he went to his father. I want you to think about not the longest trip you've ever taken, but like the longest travel you've ever done. The longest travel you've ever done. When I think about that, I think about a mission trip I led in like 2015 to Uganda. And so we drove to the airport in Jacksonville, and there were just all these pieces to it. You drove to the airport in Jacksonville, and then we flew from Jacksonville to New York City, and then we went through all the airport crap that you always have to go through, and then went from New York City to Istanbul in Turkey, which was a really, really long flight. And then we stayed at that airport for a little bit, went through customs, all that kind of stuff, and then went from Istanbul to Kenya. And we pulled up to Kenya in the middle of the night, and it was like an Uber or something. Like, people just got off the plane and got on the plane. Like, we didn't even get off the plane. Like, we just stayed on the plane, and we just sat there. And then a few people got off, and then a few people got on, and then we took off again, and then we landed in Uganda. And then once we got to Uganda, then we got into a bus, and we drove like 3 hours to the place where we were going. And there was this long amount of time between when we decided to go to Uganda, even when we started going to Uganda, and when we actually got to where we were going. That was the journey. Everybody say the journey. The journey, the journey. So we're going to talk about the journey this morning, because there was a journey for this son, this young man. He made a decision in this moment of just coming to his senses when he's sitting in pig slop, and he's just thinking about, like, what has my life come to? He made a decision, but it took him a long time to get where he was going. Took a long time to get where he was going. The title of this message is The Long Road Home. Everybody say The Long Road Home. And this is what we are going to be talking about. The journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. The journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. Remember, he was in another nation. He was a long way from home. And so he decided, I'm going to say decided a lot because this is really important. He decided to go home, but he did not get home for maybe weeks or months. Again, remember, no planes, no cars. He had no money. He didn't have a horse. He didn't have a chariot. He had nothing to do except to be able to walk from another nation back home. So he got up and he went to his father. The journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. Now, I want to make something very clear, because I think like seven of you made decisions for Jesus last night, which is amazing and so awesome. And that's why we do what we do. So I want to make something really clear here. You are welcomed home by God in an instant. You are welcomed home by God in an instant. But you still have to deal with the consequences of your decisions. Another way you could say it is, you still got to deal with life. Like, you can come home to God in an instant, be forgiven, be in a relationship with Him, but you still have to deal with life, with the consequences of your decision. And here's a lot of times what we want. And sometimes this kind of stuff gets taught, and it's a lie, and it's not true, and it actually hurts people from coming to Jesus. It doesn't help people come to Jesus. But a lot of time we give into this lie of, if you become a Christian, then fill in the blank. You'll get the girlfriend you want, you get the car you want, you'll get the job you want, you'll get the grades you want, everything will be better You'll feel better about yourself. Your addiction will be gone. Your bad habit will be gone. Your sin will be gone. Everything will be okay. We want that. It makes sense because we're humans. Like, we want to be able to make one quick decision and the pain to be gone. We want to come home to God. We want to give our lives to Christ. We want to rededicate our lives to Christ. We want to go on a weekend like this, and we want to have our relationships fixed. We want to all of a sudden just, things are good between us and our parents. Things are good between us and our best friend. Things are good between us and our boyfriend or our girlfriend. We want those relationships fixed. We want to go home, and all of a sudden we got a 3.9 GPA. It just magically appeared. All of a sudden, the last 4 years of not studying and not doing your work and making poor choices are just gone. And now you just all of a sudden have a 3.9, and we want that. We just want that to happen. We just want our grades to be better. We want our addiction to be gone. And don't just think like drugs or alcohol addiction. I'm talking about any addiction, whatever it is, pornography, addiction to stuff, addiction to money, addiction to yourself, addiction to acceptance. Whatever that addiction is, we just want that to be gone. We want it to just disappear. We want our mistakes erased. We want our punishment served. We want our troubles forgotten. But listen to me, the journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. The journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. I know this is a really short little line. So he got up and went to his father. 9 words. It seems so short. And we'll just skip past it. We'll be like, oh, he got all the money and he went out and had the wild living. And then he's with the pigs. And then all of a sudden he's home and he's having the party and all that kind of stuff. And we miss those short 9 words. That it takes time. That it doesn't happen overnight. And here's why it doesn't happen overnight. Because getting home is a process. Say it's a process. Say it's a process. And processes are frustrating, aren't they? Processes are frustrating. I talked a little bit last night about the frustration of going somewhere where you don't speak the same language as people. If you've ever tried to learn another language, how many of y'all have taken like Spanish or French or something in school? So most of us, I guess you have to. Processes are frustrating. Trying to learn another language is extremely, extremely frustrating because we don't remember learning our language because we were, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like we were little kids. And so we don't remember how long it took. Like you don't really start speaking kind of like a human being until you're like 3, maybe 4 years old. That 4 years, that's a long time. And we think we can take a semester of a language and we're like, oh, I can speak it now. It takes a long time. It's frustrating. You have to talk slowly. You have to ask other people to talk slowly, to repeat themselves. You have to put yourself out there. It's like very humbling to try to learn another language because it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It's just a process. It's a process. You have to learn the vocabulary words, and you have to learn the verbs and the adjectives, and you had to do all of that to learn your language, but you just don't remember it. Like I have a little 2-year, well, she's almost 2, and she's been alive for 2 years, and she knows like 40 words. That's it. That's all she has to show for herself. She can't even say, she just learned love you, and it's just, I just wish she was just on this little stage right now, running down to me, saying, love you. I do this little thing. She's a lot more loving than her sister. Sinclair loves me. It's in a different way. Aspen's kind of like the classic little kid. Like when I get home from work at night, I've realized like I'll make noise. I'll be like, I'll do something just to get her attention. She's in the other room and I'll be like, honey, I'm home. I don't know. I'll do something or I'll like throw down my backpack or like be like, it's so good to be home. Or I'll just say something so she hears my voice. And immediately I'll hear like toys hit the floor and I just hear this little pitter patter, and she runs towards me like her head's over her feet. She's about to fall the whole time, and she just runs up to me and hugs my leg. She's like, love you, and then she goes to Karen, love you, and just goes back and forth for like 5 minutes, and it's just amazing. But anyway, I just want to talk about my kids. Anyway, it's taken her a long time to learn how to talk, and we don't remember the process because we were little. But language is a process. It's a process. You say things wrong. You get made fun of. You get laughed at. That's why really, I'm going to get on my high horse. Really, Americans should be a lot nicer to people that don't speak their language by the way, because it's very difficult to go somewhere and try to learn their language. And by the way, most people in other countries know like 3 or 4 languages, and we're the dumb-dumbs that know one language. You should speak our language. Well, stop. So next time you meet somebody who's trying to learn English, be nice to them. Talk slowly. Listen to them. Help them, and don't just laugh at them or whatever, because it's a process. Language is a process. Here's another thing that's a process. Getting in shape. You can make a decision every January 1st at midnight. People make some decisions, don't they? They make some decisions. Okay, I'm gonna get in shape this year. This is the year. And they go January 1st, they go to the gym, and they say, well, how much do I have to pay? And they sign up, they pay their little monthly fee or whatever, their startup fee, and they do the little tour, and then they go spend $400 on a pair of Lululemon tights, and then they get their little protein shakers, and they get they go to GNC or whatever and just get like a 14-ton thing of protein that'll last for 10 years or whatever, and they get all the stuff, right? They spend all the money. They go to the gym and all that kind of stuff. They hire a personal trainer, and so they pay them $2,000 to train them for 3 hours a week or whatever, and they're like, this is the year. They make a decision. They might even prepare around that decision. But the truth is, getting in shape is a process. It's a process. It takes time. You can't do a 10-hour workout and just all of a sudden have a six-pack. It just doesn't work that way. You have to go repeatedly, time after time after time after time. You can't just make the decision. You can't just sign up for the gym. You can't just get the nice clothes. You can't just get the supplements. You have to actually put in the work day after day. And after you go week after week, month after month, you see progress. But it's a process. Everybody say it's a process. It's a process. It just takes time. Some things just take time. Getting home is a process. It's a process. And so it takes time. It does not happen overnight. And here's something that's really important to remember. When I say you can come home to God in an instant, but then there's a process. I think this is what we're talking about. It takes time for our lives to catch up with our souls. It takes time for our lives to catch up with our souls. Another way you could say it is, it takes time for our actions to catch up to our beliefs. This is why you'll see a friend or someone come to know Jesus, even yourself, come to know Jesus, and then you're still struggling with the same stuff. Because it's a process. It takes time. It takes time. You can believe something. You can believe it needs to happen, but it takes time for you to act on it. It takes time for you to act on it. You can have something happen in your soul, but it takes time for your life to catch up. It takes time for everyone else to see the difference that you've already experienced within. And so it's a really important thing that we give other people grace. It's also a really important thing that we give ourselves grace. Now, I'm not saying don't do that little cop-out where it's like, well, I'm just going to keep doing whatever. I'm just going to keep smoking. I'm just going to keep gossiping. I'm just going to keep being a jerk to my sister or whatever. I'm just going to keep on doing those things because I just need some grace. That's a cop-out. Don't. If we're ever getting into this place where we use grace as like a fallback, we're misunderstanding grace. But we have to be able to give ourselves some time, because when you give your life to Christ, things don't just get fixed all of a sudden. It takes time. It's a process. The journey to get home doesn't happen overnight. And really what we're talking about is this big church word called sanctification, which very simply is becoming more like Jesus. It's becoming more like Jesus. To be sanctified, to have sanctification is becoming more like Jesus. Throughout your life, if you're a Jesus follower, the goal is to become more like Jesus. Will you ever be like Jesus on this earth? Of course not. You'll never be perfect. You'll never have it all together. There are people that have been following Jesus for 70 or 80 years, following him with everything they have, and they're still imperfect. They still mess up. They still say the wrong thing. They still hurt people. They still think the wrong things. They still have the wrong opinions of people. They're still selfish and prideful. It does not ever become fully like Jesus on this side of eternity while we're in this earthly body. But we are called to be sanctified. And it's a process that begins when we become Jesus followers, and it goes through till we actually get to heaven in eternity. But sanctification is becoming more like Jesus. And I want to read a scripture that kind of talks about this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. This is a letter written by a guy named Paul, and he writes it to a bunch of Jesus followers in a big city called Ephesus. And here's what he says. He says, "So I tell you this, and I insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do." The Gentiles were basically everybody that was not Jewish. So basically everybody in the world that was not a part of the Jewish culture in Israel. That's what they call Gentiles. And for the purposes of this, you could also say anyone that wasn't a Jesus follower. So you must no longer live as non-believers do. We could say it that way. People that aren't following Jesus. And the futility of their thinking. Skip down to verse 20. It says this: "That, however, is not the way of life you learned." So in between there, he kind of talked about just like the way that, the rest of the world lives. And he says, we're not supposed to live like that. That's not the way of life we learned when we heard about Christ and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus. You were taught, with regard to your former way of life, to put off your old self, meaning to get rid of the old you, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, by its lying desires, by the desires that do you know your desires lie to you? The things that you want, the things that you think are important, the things that you hunger and crave after, they lie to you. They make you think that one thing will happen, that you cannot function without fulfilling that craving, but it's a lie. It's a lie. He's saying your desires are deceitful. They're lying to you. You're lying to yourself. He said, so we got to put away that old self to be made new in the attitude of our minds. To be made new in the attitude of our minds, and to put on our new self. Put on our new self. So get rid of the old, put on the new. Get rid of the old, put on the new. Created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. Now I want to flip back to Ephesians chapter 3. So one chapter before. Same author, same audience, all that. And I want to read to you the key to sanctification. The key to sanctification. This is kind of the answer to everything that we're talking about this morning. Starting in verse 16. And actually, I'm going to read it off the screen. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, from God's glorious, unlimited resources, that he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his, what's the next word? What's the next word? What's the next word? Then Christ will make his home in your hearts. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And you may have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. Let's go back to verse 17. There we are. This is where I want to focus. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Let's leave that up for a little bit. In the Old Testament, I talk about this a lot. In the Old Testament, King David had this dream. He's like, well, I'm living in a palace. God's living in a tent. So God needs a palace too. And so he tells God, I'm going to build you a palace. And God's like, I don't need a palace. I don't need a home. I don't need a human home. You can't contain my presence. I'm everywhere. I'm in everything. So I don't need that. But, I accept your gift to me. If you want to build it, I will reside in it as long as I'm in relationship with the kingdom of Israel. And so David's son builds this temple. David's son was Solomon. He builds this great, magnificent temple. And for a long time, God dwells in that temple. But God's plan was never to dwell in a building. We've talked about this a lot. God's plan was never to dwell in a building. His plan is not to dwell in this building or in any building around the world that calls itself a church. His plan, his ultimate plan from the beginning of time was always to dwell in the hearts of people. Always. Always. It was always to dwell in human hearts, to be in relationship with us. And so this is what Paul is talking about here. He says, Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. The journey home is the process of allowing God to move into every part of your life. The journey home is the process. Everybody say process. Remember, processes are difficult. They take time. Process. It's a process of allowing God to move into every part of your life. I want you to kind of think about it like a renovation project. A renovation project. Any of y'all like the HGTV shows? Yeah, they're great. Because why do we like them? We don't get anything from them. In fact, besides jealousy and envy of someone else that has a really nice new house, and we don't get anything from the shows. We like the shows simply because it's like a reclamation project. We get to see something in 23 minutes go from crap to beautiful, right? Like we're like see this house and it gets gutted, and some like little good-looking guy or girl comes in and puts. They're always wearing like really like nice clothes, but then they put on like a tool belt, and it's like, come on, like I've seen construction workers. You're not a construction worker. Anyway, so like they come in and they talk about all the stuff they're gonna do, and then they fix the house in 10 minutes, and then we're like, oh, that's awesome, and then we go on about our lives. We like to see that kind of thing, and that's really the process that happens in our life. That's sanctification, becoming more like Jesus. And here's the thing, we kind of want that to happen. Like when we invite Jesus into our lives, we're like, I want you to kind of do some things in my life, to kind of fix some parts of my life. I got a few leaks over here. I got some countertops that need replacing over here. I've got some sheetrock that needs replacing over here. And we want Jesus to do those things. We want him to come in and fix us in that way. But then Jesus has this habit of working in ways we don't understand. And so he comes into our hearts. He makes our hearts his home. And instead of just doing the stuff we know or that we knew needed to be done, he starts doing some other stuff. And here's what we do. No. Jesus, no. I wanted you to fix the bathroom, not the bedroom. No. Jesus. I don't want new floors. Don't knock down that wall. Please leave that picture hanging. I like that. I like that there. Well, okay. I guess you could fix the front door, but please don't touch the windows. And don't touch the paint. I like the paint the way it is. We want to keep things the way we like them. This is the constant struggle. This is the process. We're like, Jesus, come in and fix my life. And then it's like, yeah, but you're doing a little bit, and that hurts. You're doing a little bit too much, and there's a little bit too much dust, and there's a little bit too much of a mess. This is part of the reason I hate home projects, because it's a mess. And I like clean, and I like organized, and I like orderly. And right now there's a hole in my shower wall because there was a leak in it, and I just wanted to ignore the leak. And I would have just allowed it to just keep leaking forever, and then the house would have fallen apart. But I didn't want the mess. I didn't want the mess. And now I haven't had a bathroom for the past 3 weeks because we have to fix the leak. And in order to fix the leak, there's a little bit of pain. And for some of you, you've got to understand, in order for Jesus to fix some things in your life, there's going to be a little bit of pain. There's going to be a little bit of a process of things you have to give up in order for him to do his work. Some things you got to let go of. Some people you got to let go of. Some places you got to let go of. And I know we don't like these part of sermons. We love the welcome home. Oh yeah, and we're welcomed home exactly as we are. Yes, you are. But again, remember, to get fully home is a process. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it's tough. It's difficult. But we see the key to allowing Jesus into our hearts and allowing him to make our hearts his home in that very next line in verse 17. It says, as you trust in him. As you trust in him. Living together requires trust. It requires trust. It requires trust. You got to trust the other person. You got to trust the other person. This is why you should not get roommates off of Craigslist when you go to college. Or Facebook. Don't do it. Not a good idea. You should trust the person you live with. They have access to all your stuff. They have access to all your secrets. They have access to who you really are. And I know a lot of times you guys think as teenagers, because I thought it too, like, oh, one day I'm going to live with someone I like. Not my parents. Not my siblings. And it will be so much better. No, it won't. Trust me, y'all are going to go to college. You're going to get some roommate. And you might move in with your best friend. And you might realize, I hate my best friend. Because when you move in with people, it's just hard. This is why when I went to college, my two best friends were like, hey, y'all want to live together? And I said, no, because I want to be your friend. And I don't want to hate you. And they lived together. And guess what? One time I walked into a dorm at FSU, and I saw them wrestling on the floor in front of the elevators. Two 19-year-old grown men wrestling on the floor in a fight. That never happened until they lived together. Living together is tough. And then I know some of y'all are like, well, when I fall in love, oh, good God. Please. You know how annoying your husband or your wife is going to be to you? And you know how annoying you're going to be to them? Because living together is tough. It's difficult. And it requires trust. You've got to trust the other person. You've got to trust them with your secrets. You've got to trust them with your physical stuff. You've got to trust them with your body. You've got to trust them with your mind and your heart. You've got to trust them to live in the same places as you do. You've got to trust them. It takes trust. We've got to be able to trust Jesus, to trust him in what he's doing. So the simple question is, on this journey home that does not happen overnight, in this process of sanctification, what do you need to trust God with? What is it? What is it? Y'all should be writing something down. Think about it. What is it that you need to trust God with? Is it a relationship? Is it the way you date? Is it the way you approach sex? Is it the way you approach money? Is it how you make your decisions? Is it how you use your time? How you use your talent? Is it your future? Is it your desires? What do you need to trust God with? I want to give you another quote from C.S. Lewis, same guy we talked about last night. This is so good. This is amazing. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. This is kind of like what I was just talking about. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he's doing. It makes sense. He's getting the drains right. He's stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing. And so you're not surprised. And you're not offended. In fact, you're happy. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts and does not seem to make any sense. There's sometimes that the process of sanctification hurts. You know, it hurts when you have an infected cut. Like when I was little, I scraped my leg really bad, and it got super, super infected. I remember going to the doctor, and he took iodine and just poured it all in, and alcohol, and poured it all in, and he scrubbed it. It was like sandpaper. It hurt so bad. I was crying. But here's what he knew. He had to get rid of the bad to have healing. He had to get rid of the crap to have healing. Jesus has to get rid of some of the crap in your life, and it hurts. That's the only way you heal. It doesn't seem to make any sense, picking back up that quote. What on earth is God up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. He's throwing a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, just a little renovation project. But God's building a palace. God's building a palace. Think about that. God is taking you, and he wants to build something better than a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,500 square foot house. He wants to build something better than a second story or a little added on porch. He wants to build a palace of your life. He wants to turn you into something you could never imagine. He wants to bring in something new to replace the old that just wasn't cutting it. And maybe you thought it was. Maybe you thought, this is great. I'm satisfied. He wants to give you something beyond satisfaction, beyond anything you could imagine. He is building a palace because he intends to come and live in it himself. And here's the good news. Here's the good news of this story of the prodigal son, is that even though it's a process, and even though it doesn't happen overnight, we see something amazing as we look right past the part where it says, so he got up and went to his father. It's what we read last night. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him, was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son. Even though it's a process, even though we're far away, even though we're not where we want to be, God is constantly coming towards us. He's not waiting until we get our stuff together. He's not waiting until we get to a certain level of sanctification. He is coming towards us. And so even if you feel like it's impossible, I'm never going to get there, just remember, God's already running to you. He's already running to you constantly. He's pursuing after you, even when you're a long way off. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have, I didn't even tell them to do this, but they're so amazing that they don't need preparation to do things like this because it's just what they do. I'm going to have all the life group leaders stand up, and I just want y'all to just circle the entire room, starting from here all the way around and just kind of spread out a little bit. So life group leaders, don't stay in your seats. Come around the perimeter of the room, all the way around. Great. Here's what we're going to do. As we have this closing time of worship, they're going to be worshiping from those locations. And you can go to your life group leader. You don't have to. It could be any of the adults. And I want you to go to them, and I just want you to share, hey, this is what I need to trust God with. Can you pray for me? Because we believe in the power of prayer. The New Testament talks about the laying on of hands. It's not that touching somebody like heals them all the time, or like that it's some unique thing that God can't do otherwise. It's simply that there's power in the community. There's power in someone praying over you. And so what we should see is a whole bunch of students throughout the next couple songs going up to loving, caring adults who love Jesus and receiving prayer. So you can worship from your seat, you can worship in the aisles, you can worship up front, but whenever you feel led, go to one of the adults and have them pray over you. Let me pray, and then we're going to rotate into a time of singing worship to God. Heavenly Father, we thank you that even though it's a process, even though it takes time, you're building something magnificent in our lives. We thank you that we can make the decision to come home in an instant, and you accept us fully, even before we get it together. But we also thank you that you want more for us than where we're at right now. Lord, I pray that we would begin to let you renovate our hearts, renovate our minds, renovate our souls. Help us remember the journey is not overnight. It's a process. It's a process. It's a process. It takes time. I pray that we would trust you enough to allow you to make your home in our hearts. In your name. Amen. Let's worship together.